Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, July 17th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Indiana game is in 47 days. The game against Michigan in 131 days. Well, as we promised on Friday's show, we're going to be talking about true freshmen on the defense today. Friday, talked about some of the true freshmen on the offensive side of the ball who might be able to make an impact in some way this fall. Today, we're going to be talking about defense, and once again, we're going to bring in Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com to do all of that stuff. Tony, we were talking before the show. I mean, there's so many intriguing freshmen on this year's defense, and it feels like there's maybe some spots for guys to get on the field. We've sort of seen that in the past. We saw it a little bit with like Caden Curry last year, for example, where he wasn't starting, he wasn't playing a ton in the Peach Bowl, for example, but you saw enough from him to sort of be real intrigued about what could be coming in the future. It feels like that's kind of what we're talking about in a lot of cases with these guys.
Yeah, and that's pretty much where you want to be as a defense. You don't want to be thinking, boy, I hope these three freshmen can start okay for us and, give us 80 snaps a game or else we're doomed. So what you're hoping for is, boy, I hope these freshmen can flash in the fourth quarter of a 4-touchdown game, that sort of thing, and give us good looks in practice and things like that. You don't ever want to count on them, but when they continue to climb up, then everybody earns their playing time. And if you got a freshman that stands out, go ahead and throw them out there. Tom, as I've always said, if a dog is going to bite, that dog is going to bite as a younger dog.
I think I've heard something like that at some point in Ohio State history before. Not sure when. It feels like it's been a minute. One thing that's a little different on the defensive side of the ball is there were a lot more of the guys on the offensive side of the ball who were in for spring. And when you're a true freshman, that's something that makes a big difference in terms of your physical and mental readiness to get on the field in the fall, because you got to get up to Big Ten level strength. You've got to get up to learning the playbook, really understanding the playbook, understanding how stuff goes. Speaking of things that have never been said before in Ohio State history, Tony, sometimes when guys first get to campus, it's like they're trying to drink through a fire hose with all of the information that is getting thrown at them. So we should print T-shirts. I don't think anyone's ever used that phrase before. But let's start with that defensive line. And the defensive line group is interesting because the guy who, if I was just going to pick someone, all else being equal, to potentially be the guy who plays the most this fall, it would be Jason Moore. But Jason Moore wasn't in this spring. And, I think there's things that maybe make him, he's got a little bit of positional flexibility where maybe he could be an end, maybe he could be a 3-tech. But, of the defensive linemen that we're looking at here, is there one that you think is maybe most likely to make some kind of an impact this fall?
Yeah, I think you have to look at kind of the depth chart and see, is there a path to playing time? And then what can that person do? And you mentioned Jason Moore, and if he is a 3-tech, I think last account, I think Larry Johnson said he's up to about 295 pounds, so I'm going to assume he's playing defensive tackle at this point, but is a pass rushing 3-tech because he played defensive end in high school. And so we know Larry Johnson likes that. The depth chart at 3-tech right now, it's Tyleik Williams, and sometimes Mike Hall will be there, but he doesn't need to be there, and sometimes he will because Ty Hamilton's at nose tackle and Jaden McKenzie. Like, it's not the deepest group, depending on how things shake out. So I think there's an opportunity there, but then you've got Will Smith, who was in the spring and plays that same position, got hurt in the spring, but is a guy who's been doubted all his life, despite the fact that, his father being an Ohio State all-time great. I think for him, they look at his father and it's like, well, that's not, you've always been undersized, you've always been this, you've always been that, and finally, doubted by college coaches, comes to Ohio State. And I think he's going to continue working, and the mentality that he carries with him, he might be one that surprises people. Then is, Joshua Mickens as a defensive end, a pass rusher. Can he do what Caden Curry did last year and get those reps in the fourth quarter when the opponent is throwing the ball nonstop and Joshua Mickens knows all I have to do now is rush the passer? Those are situations that Larry Johnson loves for his defensive ends, for his young defensive ends. Very little pressure. They know what they're going to get. They know what to expect. They're not going to be prone to making a mistake. And so you can just let him go. And so I'll be interested to see what kind of impact he can have, because I think it may not result in any I don't know what his WAR would be, Tom, but when you look back, he had 4.5 tackles for loss, and they may have all come in the fourth quarter of blowouts, but it's something that you take note of.
Yeah, you're in a situation there when you can do what with your ears, Tony, as a pass rusher?
You can pierce them. Pin them back,
partial
Tom.
credit. Yes, there we go. You can pin them back. Depends on if you have that look in your eye. We're just gonna play college football cliche bingo on this show. Just decided, and I think including the free space, I think we may have both just gotten bingo. I think Joshua Mickens is someone who might be in the position to get on the field and be in a little bit of an impact role in the fourth quarter of games that some people have already turned off and flipped over to another channel. But those are all very meaningful reps and a good indication that something might be on the horizon there for Joshua Mickens. It's also, as an edge rusher, I asked Larry Johnson about this when we talked to him back in May. And just as an edge rusher, his view was it's a little easier to get on the field because the interior of that line, you're taking such a pounding, it just takes more to get physically ready for it. And a lot of times you need that year in the weight room before you're really ready to be an interior defensive lineman. Sometimes you can kind of get thrown out on the edge in just a very, narrowly defined situation, like a pure pass rush situation, and it doesn't necessarily take as much physical development to be able to stand up to that type of role. So that might be something working in Joshua Mickens' favor. Something working against Arvell Reese. Well, number one, he's the only linebacker in this class, so he is definitely the most likely linebacker to make an impact this fall. However, I think we talked before the show, and it feels like there are so many guys on that depth chart, and they're really only playing 2 linebackers right now. And so you've got Tommy Eichenberg, you got Steel Chambers, you got Cody Simon, you got CJ Hicks. Are they going to have Sonny Styles play linebacker at some point? You got Gabe Powers, you got Reed Carrico. There's just so many guys ahead of him for only 2 spots, and he wasn't in for the spring. So we're going to kind of gloss past the linebackers. That just feels like someone who you may see him on special teams, but there are going to be these snaps on defense are going to be hard to come by. CJ Hicks coming in as a 5-star last year didn't get any snaps on defense, so that is not necessarily any kind of disparagement on Arvell Reese's future at Ohio State. Just feels like it's going to take some time to get on the field there. Let's talk about the corners instead. And Jermaine Matthews, Calvin Simpson-Hunt, these are guys who both, I think, are ranked and have the physical traits to be guys who could make an impact early. Jermaine Matthews is the guy who I picked first overall in our Black Stripe draft. He has not lost his Black Stripe yet, but there's a lot to be positive about around Jermaine Matthews. Calvin Simpson-Hunt, very, very fast track guy out of Texas. He was not in for the spring. This, though, Tony, to me feels like an area where, again, there's so much depth ahead of those guys that unless you have kind of the wave of injuries that you had at corner last year, it's going to be relatively difficult for those guys to get on the field too early.
Yeah, and we say that, and then remember Jair Brown started the 4th game of the season last year as a true freshman, and things can look great, and then they can go to heck real quick. But when you look at those guys, and who is the most likely to break out again, you start with who is in the spring, here in the spring, who has been through it, who has been had their ups and downs, who has been able to take that criticism, take that coaching, and grow from it. Because I don't think you immediately grow from it. The struggles, they slow you down, and then you have to come through that. And so when you're dealing with that in fall camp for the first time, then I think you're going to have some slow points. But it's a long season, and practice continues every single week throughout that season. So there will be opportunities for Calvin Simpson-Hunt to catch up and maybe to surpass. But like you said, both guys, top 10 corners in the nation. Calvin Simpson-Hunt, both good size. I think they list Jermaine Matthews like 5'11". Calvin Simpson-Hunt is 6 foot. Talking to his high school coach earlier in the summer, he's got what I call avatar arms. He's got really long arms. He can grab you and just lock you in press coverage, and is strong and is physical. Jermaine Matthews is a guy that I told Jim Knowles, he's like offense on defense, and Knowles yeah, because when you watch him, he'll get the ball in his hands anyway and then do something with it. He wants the ball, he wants to make plays. Calvin Simpson-Hunt doesn't want to give up catches, and they're different kinds of guys, different kinds of players, but I think they complement each other really, really well. I don't know how much either one of them will see the field on defense this year, because again, you want to give Jair Brown, who's probably your fourth corner this year, as much opportunity as possible in games and games that are already over. Ryan Turner as well. You want to see, can he handle this? Can he play at this level? So there are guys you got to find out about first and give them opportunities because they may be starting next year. So the turnover from this year to next year mandates that you play a bunch of corners this year, and I don't think that excludes your two freshmen.
Yeah, I mean, you could, after this year, lose Denzel Burke. You could, after this year, lose Jordan Hancock, Davis and Igbinosa in the third corner, at least as of where things were sort of left after the spring. He is a second-year player, so he would have another year along with Jair Brown and Ryan Turner. But yeah, you're potentially, theoretically, at the end of the 2024 season, all five of those guys could be gone. So there is a clear path to the playing field for these guys relatively soon with the way that Ohio State tends to turn over that corner position. So one more spot we got to look at, and that is safeties. This is somewhere where two of these guys were not in for the spring, so that's going to be a hard, little bit of a tougher hill to climb. It's also, there's a pretty well-stocked safety room, and they've got some real talent in that safety room this year. So it's going to be pretty hard for any of the three guys, Malik Hartford, Cedric Hawkins, and Jaden Bonsu, to crack that, at least the two deep. Is there one of these guys? I mean, does Malik Hartford kind of have the lead just because he was in for the spring?
Yeah, I think so. And he's a guy that has played both free safety and strong safety, so he's had that experience and I think can play either one of those spots. Whereas Jaden Bonsu, I view him as a Court Williams type, who is probably more of a strong safety, closer to the line of scrimmage, more of a, if you want to throw Sonny Styles in that group as well, somebody that's not necessarily a free safety. Cedric Hawkins, we don't really know what he is going to play because we haven't really seen him. So is he a nickel? Is he, where exactly is he? So I think there's still some figuring out there. I think the fact that they know so much more about Malik Hartford, who will also be involved in special teams, I think he is definitely the pick there to have the biggest impact because I think he can do more things as far as we know right now, and is also a pretty big hitter, Tom. I don't know if you know that. If you've seen the highlights, but also so is Jaden Bonsu. But I like the experience that Malik Hartford gained this spring. I thought was very solid.
And anytime someone's a big hitter, sure, you're thinking about them on defense. You might also be thinking about them on special teams. That is a place where we have seen some big hitters make their names earlier in their Ohio State careers than they do on the offensive or defensive side of the ball. So that's a whole separate calculation here that we have not factored into this conversation, but something to keep in mind for the fall as well. So something else to keep in mind for the fall, I want to be a member of BuckeyeHuddle.com. We have a fantastic team of insiders covering the team, covering recruiting, covering X's and O's, covering all the scheme talk, making you a smarter football fan. Fantastic community. Lots of chat about football stuff. Lots of chat about sort of off-topic stuff. Random, a lot of barbecue chat on there generally. Fun stuff to do, on vacation. I love the threads that where someone's just, hey, I'm going to go on vacation here. You have any recommendations? And there's always someone who has a condo there or has vacationed there a bunch of times and can give you some good inside details on wherever you're headed on vacation. It is a really fun community. Great place to be a part of, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. So sign up there today. Make sure you also check out all of our podcasts on whatever podcast platform you like. Just search Buckeye Huddle. You'll find the Buckeye Weekly podcast, the Big Big Kickoff podcast, Skull Session podcast, and much more. Fantastic recruiting talk and Ohio State football talk and, whatever nonsense you guys throw at us. We have, on the Buckeye Weekly podcast, we are in the middle of a series of listener question shows. So, hey, listen, we're here for you, and you guys are providing us all sorts of questions that you want answered on Ohio State football and the stadium and favorite road trips and all sorts of random off-topic stuff as well. We're here for you, so that if you want to listen to those, you can find those. Just search Buckeye Huddle on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. Just leave us. We would appreciate if you would leave us a 5-star rating and review as well. That helps other folks find those shows. And finally, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. We will have plenty of coverage coming up next week now from Big Ten Media Days. We'll have interviews with players and coaches from all around the league, as well as, of course, Ohio State players and coaches as well. And then a couple weeks after that, fall camp's going to get started. We'll have all sorts of content there for you as well. So lots of great stuff coming up all right now. BuckeyeHuddle.com on your podcast platform of choice, and of course at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle as well. that will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.